call.
Johnson.
Hello.
Here.
Hi, if you wouldn't mind muting person on the phone.
Johnson.
Present.
Whitebird. Here. Markham.
Here.
Miller is absent with notice. Rahman.
Present.
Long.
Here.
Spiz.
Present.
Smith Charles.
Present.
You have more.
We have a quorum. I also want to ask that we always make sure to speak right into the microphones, including our presenters. And we will be using the request to speak just to make sure I can keep everything in order. Mrs. Markham, would you please lead us in the pledge? Let's all stand.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That takes us to approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? If not, we just need a motion to approve the minutes of the Economic Development Infrastructure Committee. Moved by Commissioner Spiz, supported by Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, we will prompt the vote.
Oh, it says close. Oh, okay. Close session.
You have 7 yeas, your nays.
Great, motion is carried. Thank you.
Feel like
That takes us to item 5 on the agenda, which is approval. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved and supported. Spiz and Whitebird. Any discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and prompt that vote.
You have 7 yeas, your nays.
he's the chair for all.
Thank you. That motion carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 6 on the agenda, which is public comment. It is a 3-minute max per speaker, related only to items on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to address the Economic Development Infrastructure Committee for our first public comment? Just making sure, in case anyone wanted to make their way. But I see no public comment at this time, so I'll go ahead and close it and acknowledge member ex officio David Woodward, who has arrived as well. Welcome. Item 7, communications. We need a motion to receive and file. Commissioner Long and Commissioner Markham, in that order. Thank you. So as it says, item A in communications is a memorandum regarding County Veteran Services Service Fund Budget Amendment. We do have Garth here if anyone has any questions on that, as well as a guest, which we always like to take time for when they have 4 legs or beaks. Garth, did you want to just come up briefly and introduce your companion?
Oh, sure. This is Leia. She is a registered therapy dog, and we use her in our office for veterans who are struggling to get through an interview or having a bad day, and also our staff when they're having a rough day. I think the staff probably appreciates her as much as our veterans do, but she's 6 years old, golden retriever, registered with the Alliance of Therapy Dogs.
Thank you. Wonderful. And I love the diversity and approach. And she's welcome anytime at any of our meetings.
Yeah, I want one for us.
I was just gonna say, having that exact dog, but he doesn't say that good on a leash.
So that concludes the portion in terms of just if anyone had any questions, we can go ahead and prompt the vote on this receiving and filing the communication.
You have 8 yeas, 0 nays.
That Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Takes us to item number 8 on the agenda, which is Economic Development Brownfield Presentation. And I'll accept a motion to, or,
We can do it after they get it.
yeah, we can do that after.
Okay.
So welcome Brett and Bradley and Kristen. And you may come right up to those 3 chairs up front. We're very excited to have you today. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess my first thought is I'm thrilled to see all this interest in our Brownfield program. It's a packed room today. We have some slides to show you, and it's an overview of the county's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And if it's the committee's pleasure, we'd like to come back and visit throughout the year and present some of our other programs as well. My name's Brett Razgan. I'm the manager of the Planning and Local Business Development Division. This is Kristen Wolfang. She's the administrator of Trails, Transportation, Environment, and Brad Hansen, or Bradley, is the coordinator of our Brownfield program. Kristen and I will be visiting with many of you for the entire day today as well on other items. The organization of our department, there's one change that we need to make to this, is that the newly created transit division is also within economic development. So it's a 5-division department. Within planning and local business development, we're organized into 3 groups: trails, transportation and environment, planning, zoning and land use, and local business development. And in all of those areas, we provide a number of services and programs to local communities and also nonprofit organizations. The Brownfield program is within Kristen's area, the trails, transportation and environment. We have some slides. They're a little bit text heavy, but we thought if you keep this document, it's a good reference for you. And there's even a few additional slides after the concluding slide with more detailed information about TIF and also the internal process here at the county. With that, I'll turn it over to Brad.
Good morning.
Morning.
And I'm very fortunate because I have 3 sitting board members, CBRA board members here around the table on the sidelines here with Commissioner Woodward, Commissioner Spiz, and Corporate Counsel Solon Phillips. So that's 3 of our 7 board members are in the room today, which is great. So at its core, the Brownfield program is a cleanup and environmental program that also helps with economic development with an incentive and create jobs and create a higher tax base for the community. So why establish a BRA? Again, it's to address environmental conditions of property, promote economic growth, address problem sites within the community. A lot of times there's sites in communities that just can't get developed for certain reasons. A lot of it's dealing with the contamination or blightness or functionally obsolete. Another good part of the Brownfield program is it halts the deterioration of tax base, not only for that specific property that we use the Brownfield on, but the surrounding areas. Once a problem area gets redeveloped, the surrounding area goes up in tax base as well. So Public Act 381 of 1996 is the enabling legislation for the Brownfield Financing Act. It basically just allows developers to get reimbursed for eligible activities on a brownfield site, for whether that be mostly contamination, but also demolition of functionally obsolete buildings, site prep in some core communities, There are 4 main types of properties that can qualify for a brownfield. The first and most well-known one, obviously, is called facilities, and that is contaminated properties. Those are properties that are deemed they have contaminants over a certain level in the ground or groundwater to make it be classified as contaminated. So those obviously need to be cleaned up or properly taken care of before development can happen. The second one is functionally obsolete property. This is determined by a level 3 or 4 assessor. So if you have a property that you think might be functionally obsolete, you do have to get documentation from a level 3 or 4 assessor deeming it to be functionally obsolete. Blighted property is the third one. Blighted property is, you basically just need a resolution or a letter from the highest elected official or the city or township council saying that the property is a nuisance, whether that be because it's a hindrance to or danger to children, or there's permanent disconnection of the utilities. There's different qualifications for what is blighted, but you basically just need a letter from the local community issued that as such. And the last one and most exciting recently is the properties under control of the land bank. Obviously, with the creation of the Oakland County Land Bank, we have the opportunity to partner with them, and I've already been on multiple meetings with Jill, who I understand she gave a presentation a couple weeks ago. So it'll be a great working relationship, and the key component about that is any property, no matter where you are in Oakland County, that's under control of the land bank is automatically eligible for all environmental eligible activities. This one has a lot of a lot of words on it, so the first two are basically the same, though. It deals with the financing, if you will, the incentive to the developer. So it's tax increment financing. So it's an increased tax value due to the redevelopment and cleanup of the property. So the base value stays the same, and that goes to proper taxing jurisdictions. But it's an increased value that the developer puts into it that is captured by the authority and be reimbursed to the developer over a course of time. TIF is applied only to the redevelopment area of the brownfield plan, not necessarily. You might be familiar with corridor improvement authorities or DDA, where those entities capture from hundreds of properties to increase the tax base or collect a TIF. In brownfield, it's site specific. So if we pass a brownfield plan, it only captures the TIF that the developer has made improvements on. So it's just the site specific and not the whole area wide. And there's a map later on that'll emphasize that for the city of Novi for one of our projects. Once the redevelopment is finished, the increased tax base goes 100% to all the taxing mills. So once the developer is completely reimbursed for the eligible activities, all the 100% new taxes go to proper taxing jurisdictions. Eligible activities for reimbursement. So any property in Oakland County currently can qualify for the first set of items here on this slide. So it's basically just Eagle specific or cleanup activities, and then lead and asbestos, obviously, which is housed actually under MEDC for some reason and not Eagle. Then demolition of structures, but for the core communities or eligible qualified local unit governments, we also call them core communities, which I believe there's 8 in Oakland County. All the incentives on the first part is included, plus infrastructure improvements that directly benefit the property and site prep that is not response activity. So those two, which could add a lot of dollars and eligible activities to a project, are qualified for those core communities. Now, again, the good thing about the land bank that was created, there's some problem sites that won't qualify for certain things. We had an issue with this with our project in Commerce Township. So we utilized the state land bank, and in doing so, we are able to have that property qualify for all eligible activities to be reimbursed to the developer. Developer incentives. So the incentive is a reimbursement. It's not an upfront cost. The development has to happen. The developer property owners need to pay their taxes. And it's those taxes that they pay that are captured and reimbursed to the developer over a set number of years. The reimbursement is based solely on actually what has taken place out there. So it's an up to maximum. So if a brownfield plan is passed for $5 million, but there's only $3 million of activity that's done out there, it's only a $3 million reimbursement, because we thoroughly vet the reimbursement requests that come in. They have to show all their proper invoices and proof of payment in order to get paid, and we review that internally, but then we also send it out to a third party, have them review it as well. So that's the part where it's not guaranteed to the developer. So, some people will see, well, this is a $5 million reimbursement or incentive, and it really isn't. At the end of the day, we'll know what the number is, but a lot of times it comes in under that amount of money. So here's the map I was showing. This is the green is the Corridor Improvement Authority for the city of Novi. So you can see there's, I would say, hundreds of parcels that collect TIF for the CIA for the city of Novi. And the parcel in red, or parcels in red, is our Sakura Novi project, which is the exciting Asian-themed mixed-use project in the city of Novi.
Excuse me, just what roads are there? I see 96, but,
Grand River.
oh, Grand River, okay, thank you.
Just east of Novi Road.
Okay, thanks.
Behind the
Side
side
center. Okay.
So it's just that red area that's only capturing TIF for that project that we reimbursed to the developer. Our Oakland County BRA, established in 2001, 7 current members. Again, 3 of them are sitting around the table today or on the sidelines here. The members are appointed by the county executive. We just got the letters over to the Board of Commissioners for reappointments for 6 of our 7 members. So hopefully at the next Board of Commissioners or the meeting after that, it'll be read into by the clerk for the reappointments of an appointment. Actually, there's 4 members. I keep Brett's now on our board too, so now there's 4 of the 7 members. I forgot. Sorry, Brett. That's right. We typically meet on a quarterly basis, but we meet as needed. A lot of times our project comes up and we can't wait the 2 months till the scheduled meeting is supposed to take place, so I'll send out a poll and see what's available and try to get it moving as quickly as possible. So far, we've approved 23 projects through the Oakland County BRA. Obviously, our local communities that have their own BRA have their own list, and actually there's a map in front of you. It needs to be updated. I believe the last update was from June of 2021, but you will see that other communities have their own BRA programs and they have their own projects in their communities as well. So Oakland County's BRA, we were established to help those communities that don't have a BRA, but we're also here to help communities that do have their own BRA but need more experience or more expertise with a specific project. And so we'll just ask for a couple resolutions from local unit of government that basically releasing the project to Oakland County BRA, and the second one concurring with the provisions of the brownfield plan. So the local community is well aware of what the ask is, and if the local community starts, says we're not interested in this, the project is completely dead. We have to have a local buy-in, obviously. So next one's our BRA reference slides. So this, and I kind of explained this already, but the eligible property, just a little bit more background to those 4 items. The next one is a brownfield TIF diagram. It really shows what is really being captured by one entity, what's being used for reimbursement. So you can go ahead and read through that. And then the last one is the long process to get a brownfield project approved. And it really starts off with the local community in the Oakland County BRA, but then it also goes through this body, BDI committee, and then it goes through the full Board of Commissioners for public hearing and the final vote. And at that point, the brownfield project is confirmed or approved for local only taxes. So that's everything except for state education taxes and school operating. That's controlled by the state of Michigan, both EGLE and MEDC. So if a developer or a project's going for state school taxes, they will need to go to both EGLE and MEDC or MSF to get approval. In order to do that, they need to put together what's called Act 381 work plan, which is way more detailed and way more information to get those approvals. And roughly, for most of the communities, it's roughly around 50% of the project. The TIF dollars comes for those 2 sources of tax mills, so it's a vital part of the project for a lot of projects. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
But regardless of whether the state EGLE and they say, okay, it still happens.
Yeah, well, if it makes sense for the development to still
Right.
happen.
And dollar-wise, right?
Yes, I mean, if it doesn't work for the developer, then not getting state school taxes, a lot of times the project will just stop.
Because it's the
But
biggest,
nor-
that's the biggest part.
Yeah, normally we know that before we go through the whole process. We thoroughly vet, I try to thoroughly vet everything, make sure the state's on board, or if they're not, the developer will know that and know what they're dealing with.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner
Sorry, I
Long?
should have raised my hand.
Oh, yeah, you gotta hit request, you said to. I just wanted to, a lot of you are in the room, thank you for all your help on the Commerce Township, that took a long time. I get it, you explained well why it was taking long, but I appreciate all your help, and there's a lot of board members here, so thank you.
I did at one point.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Markham?
Yeah, I should have done the thing. I just have a question. I don't even know if it's really related, but the Green Slime Building from a couple of years ago out there in Madison Heights where the green slime
Slime,
appeared
yeah.
and all that, Did that fall into this at all? That was financed, the cleanup of that was financed some other way?
Yeah, I mean, our office didn't touch it, we didn't see anything, but Madison Heights has their own authority. I don't know if they saw anything, but I think that was more of a state and federal cleanup dollars, but yeah, we didn't. we
It
weren't-
went
we
pretty
didn't wanna touch that
quickly
one.
to get that cleanup,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
just wondered. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Woodward?
Well, I mean, just related to that, I mean, there was general fund dollars, Wilkin County, that helped accelerate, but as Brett said, it's like it was mostly state money, federal pass-through money through Eagle that helped to facilitate that.
Okay.
Tear down. Now, the redevelopment of that property, I mean, I think that's where there may be an opportunity. Since we took his building, the building is gone.
Right.
Any
Okay.
other comments or discussion? I did, in my notes, put 6 of 7 board members. Is that out of the ordinary for you to be, for all 6 to be renewing at the same time?
No, it's, with our bylaws, we have 1-year terms, 2-year terms, and 3-year terms, so it so happened at this time that they all matched up, and 5 of them needed to be. And plus, there's been a little bit of turnover as far as, Brad took over for Ingrid Ty, who took over for Dan Hunter, so there's been some.
Yes, thank you. And then maybe email-wise, but others around this table might also want to know what makes up core communities and what those core communities are. So if it's a 30-second answer, then by all means, and otherwise you can share that with us.
Sure, it's state legislation, and in Oakland County, it makes sense, 'cause it deals a lot with economic. There's the 8-mile ring communities that are in it, City of Pontiac, City of Southfield, Oak Park, Royal Township, Madison Heights, Hazel Park.
Is it due to like there being older infrastructure?
Yeah, that and, but when you look at the legislation, when you go around the state, there's been add-ons where it doesn't really follow those aspects, and so there's obviously probably some special interest by some legislators to put some other communities in there, but yeah, I mean, I think at the core, I think it's more economic in the actual makeup of the properties in the community historically that will base it as a core community.
We'll find that list in the legislation and the criteria for you and email it.
That'd be great. Thank you. You can email it right to Connie.
Okay.
Other than that, we can go ahead and receive and file this. I'll take a motion to do so. Commissioner Law
I'll move to receive and file.
and Commissioner Sturts. Comments, questions, concerns? Otherwise, we'll prompt a vote.
You have 8 ayes and 0 nays.
That motion carries unanimously. So the motion carried. That takes us to item number 9 on the agenda, which is our regular agenda. And we will start with item A. Ms. Cheryl Bush is here. I'll entertain a motion to open Report A, Economic Development, Aviation, and Transportation Grant Acceptance, 2022 EGLE Airport PFAS Grant. Ms. Markham. Mr. Wyford. Ms. Bush, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, we have a grant today that has been awarded us from the state of Michigan, Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, the Eagle Group. And this is in the amount of $121,500. This is to continue the investigation on airport property, Oakland County International specifically, for the investigation of PFAS on the premises. So this is the second grant. I think this one will probably conclude and satisfy what Eagle is looking for from us at this time.
Great. Any speakers? Mr. Spiz?
I just have a general question, and I don't know if it really answers it in the information we have. How long is this investigation going to take?
Well, the award is offered through December 31st of 2025, but I think we will be complete at the end, by the end of this year or early beginning '24.
Okay, thank you.
Grab another pen. Anyone else?
Just curious, is this an ongoing study? Or I know you mentioned this was the second one. So has there been a previous PFAS-related problem at the airport, and that's why we're undergoing these studies? I'm just not familiar with the background of kind of what's happened here, so.
Well, it's not just Oakland County International Airport, it's every airport in the state and in the country that, when the PFAS issue was identified, the airports were targeted because of the use of firefighting foam that we use on airports. That foam is a requirement by the FAA, so we have no choice. We are forced to use that foam. We're very fortunate at Oakland County in that we never use that foam for training, which is where a lot of the contamination has stemmed from, and we just use pure water. So it's relatively minor, but the tolerances are very, very low. And so there is some evidence, and that what they're looking for now is a plume to see if there is evidence of PFAS that is leaving the airport. Although Eagle has not really been focused on where is it coming into the airport? They're just really looking at, is it leaving the airport? So that's where their focus is right now.
So there's no reason to suspect that there's a problem?
No, there is some evidence of it, and it's expected because of the foam and because PFAS is in so many of our household items that we use. So it's a matter of the concentration levels, and then once this study is completed, I expect that they'll have some remediation plan that they'll ask for. And hopefully there'll be more state, if not federal dollars there to help us do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rahman. Any other questions or comments from the body? Seeing none, we can go ahead and prompt the vote to recommend this to the board.
You have 8 yeas, 0 nays.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Bush.
Thank you.
Takes us to item B under the regular agenda, Water Resource Commissioner Resolution Establishment of Normal Levels for Bay Lake. I believe is how it's properly pronounced. And we have Ryan and Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Pardon me. Yep. Mr. Wypert moves and supported by Commissioner Johnson.
Sure.
And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Mike McMahon, the Chief Engineer at the Water Resources Commissioner's Office over the Drains and Lakes Group, and Ryan is the lake level engineer. And so we come today bringing a petition to the board that was signed by residents of Bay Lake, which is in Bloomfield Hills. And this is in accordance with the Lake Level Control Act. So I'll let Ryan go into a little more detail, and he's been working with the residents there.
Yeah, so we started this process in 2019. They finally got some folks on board and circulated a petition, held a public meeting, decided their best bet was to go forward with a lake level control structure. They have an aging dam that's owned by a private owner that isn't necessarily maintaining it, and it needs to be maintained so they can maintain their property values. So as part of the Lake Level Control Act, it goes to the Board of Commissioners to delegate it back to us typically to bring that dam up to code, construct a new one, and maintain a lake level. And with that, I guess I'll open it up to any questions you may have on the process and what's in front of you.
Thank you. And just someone around the table might know who the Bay Lake we're talking about. Is there a commissioner? Because we have like lake commissioners.
It doesn't have an LID.
I don't think they're.
Not currently. They also are going for one of those. It's in Gersonson's district, I do believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
She is aware of it as well. We've had conversations.
Thank you. And again, kind of a note to self, so I apologize, I'm talking around you, but I'd like to see the commissioner, whenever lakes come to us, be a part of that resolution, even if they're not on this committee, just as because they know the lake much better than perhaps we do. So other than that, is there other, I do. Bravo to my team, look at this. We'll start with Commissioner Wypert and then Mr. Spence.
Thank you. So this one, it seemed, is there also talk about spending the $700,000? Is this, we're going to build a structure?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's coming?
Yes. Part of that public meeting, we kind of gave them a ballpark figure based on the last one we brought, which was the upper Straits, which is around $800,000. We kind of said that's a guesstimate of where we think we're going to be at. Until we actually get out there, we'll figure out what that's gonna look like once we design something, but.
And I mean, this is a small group of homeowners. They're gonna foot the bill for,
26 residents. At the meeting, I had, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 ask where to send their check of 40 grand to.
wow.
So,
And that's, I mean, this is not normal where.
Yeah. Big me.
So,
They all remember Sanford Lake.
Yeah, really.
but I mean, were you guys surprised on the anxiousness to get it done?
I mean, I think they understand a lot of the value of their home does come from that lake and having that amenity in their backyard. And like Commissioner Spiz said, money isn't exactly an object to them.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Right.
Been a good few years for the rich.
Anything else from you, Mr. Whiteford?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Commissioner Spig?
I'm just wondering, similar to my earlier question for a previous presentation, timing. How long, what's the time frame they're looking to do this? Are we talking next 2 to 3 years? I know there's a lot of steps that still have to happen, but what's the rough time frame, and what's the duration of the dam that's privately owned lifespan? Is it at the end? Is it?
We're pretty near the end. I mean, we're gonna be monitoring it pretty closely. I've been out there a couple times, just because there is some significant deterioration to the dam. I don't believe we're in any immediate that's gonna fail tomorrow, but it is definitely at the end of its lifespan, and we're probably looking at hopefully a 2 to 3 year turnaround would be optimal to get something new in there that we can trust.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you very much, Chair. 2 questions that are related to each other. One, just remind me which watershed this lake is in.
Here.
Okay. And then 2, based on.
Rouge.
Rouge? It is Rouge? Okay. Based on a rudimentary Google, this is not a native map. This is a man-made or lake, correct?
Based on the topography, I would say yes, it's probably was man-made.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Markham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask about the special assessment, but somebody else did. So,
Okay. Very good question,
Thank you.
though. All right, well, I don't see any other questions from the floor, and we'll go ahead and prompt the vote to recommend this to the board.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carried. Thank you for your presentation on this portion. I believe that's it for you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, that takes us to item C on the regular agenda, which is Economic Development Oakland Transit presentation. I'll entertain a motion to open this report to receive and file, or do we do that after? We'll do that after we hear the report. I got a nod from my.
Yeah, so this will move you forward. It's really weird, but.
It's like your child going to kindergarten. The baby's growing up.
Oh.
Just a kindergarten.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, good morning.
And with you, Hillary, looks like we have Kristen and Brett as well. And just as a note to the committee that this item definitely informs the next set all the way to the end of the agenda. So this will be a good time for questions if need be.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. If it's okay, we'll probably cover all 6 items that are on your agenda in one presentation, and then however you want to take the questions regarding them, we're happy to.
Great.
So you mentioned some of my partners, but I do want to, at the onset, acknowledge and thank Brett Razigan. I didn't realize you had another item on the agenda. You've been working on something else. Our manager of planning and his colleague, Kristen Wolfang, have been just tremendous partners in this transit effort. Also from Corp Counsel, Bill DeBazio, who's here, and Aaron and Solon have just put in, so much effort in these last 2.5 months. all the providers who are here with us today to answer any of your specific questions. We are grateful for the work that they have put in. The communities outside of the footprint of the current providers have been constructive, and we'll talk more about what we suggest in those areas initially. And also, I want to acknowledge your chairman, Dave Woodward, who I know will take this as the compliment it is meant to be, but, you know, to a certain extent has been our staff partner in this effort, because he has known more than us in a number of regards, and we have really relied on his advice. So with that, I want to say this is a start. I'm sure we won't be able to answer all of your questions. I'm sure we have missed things. I'm sure we have not gotten things right in some respects. But what we set out to do after the voters approved the millage in November was to establish, you know, a new foundation for the next 10 years. And I think that we have started a pretty decent foundation for your consideration today. There's a lot of things to be figured out going forward, but I think that what we are putting before you today is a good first step. So if we can go to the presentation, just kind of as a review of what brings us, you know, in the last 2.5 months. Of course, you know, the passage of the millage, the efforts that this board took so quickly, right, to see the millage on the December tax bills, to create the transit division within economic development. We are currently, we have been posting and received some applicants for both the manager position and the planner position. So we hope that that bears some fruit in the weeks ahead. And then, of course, our treasurer and Kyle Jen, who is our CFO, who's also here. I think he has a seat in the hallway. Oh, thank you. He's come in, you know, creating the transit fund and helping us think through, you know, the financial aspect. So we set out, like I said, initially to really put in place contracts with all the providers, since we're changing the structure from the previous one with the Oakland County Public Transit Authority to the county being at the center of the transit effort. So we have, for your consideration, the 4 interlocal agreements with the providers. We also are suggesting, and Brett will talk about this more later, a local transportation reimbursement program. We have, and we'll get into this a little bit with the budgets, but this was really, you know, in our conversations with Chairman Woodward, what we are putting before you today are scopes of work that the providers can do within their current infrastructure or within an infrastructure that they can obtain in like 60 to 90 days. A lot of, all of the providers have made requests for additional vehicles in the fall, but those vehicles are not available to them yet. And so what we asked them to do is to take those vehicle purchases out of their budgets for now, because we wanted to take some time to make sure that we think through whether there are state or local grants that can help supplement our efforts to provide more vehicles. So we didn't want to put out all county money to buy these vehicles when there could be federal funds that we could apply for to leverage. So we'll probably back to you in the summer thinking about the fall purchase of vehicles, because they're not available until later in the year in any case. So these are scopes of work that they can do within their current infrastructure. We have as a goal, and this again is something that's before you, you know, after this foundation is established, you know, the type of public and stakeholder engagement that will help us kind of weave together the fabric of a countywide system. And again, part of that is looking for, you know, how we fill additional gaps. So as I said, we have 4 contracts for you to look at, or interlocal agreements, and 2 resolutions for you to consider. The contracts that Bill and Aaron and Solon worked tirelessly on with the lawyers from all of the providers are traditional county contracts to an extent. They have all of the same types of things that you've seen in other contracts in terms of insurance that's verified by risk management, the payment schedule that is agreed to by fiscal services. These are 3-year contracts with a 1-year financing mechanism. As we had talked to the providers right after the November election, we were looking to do 1-year contracts. But reacting to some of the response that we had gotten from the communities, we decided to do a 3-year base contract and a 1-year financing mechanism. We think that gives us all the flexibility to figure out what we want to do in the years going forward, but it also signals to the communities and the local providers that we are long-term partners with them. The budgets for the local providers are in there, the insurance requirements that I mentioned, the payment schedules, and then reporting requirements are similar for all 4 providers. So if we start with our friends from SMART, SMART is a regional transit provider, as you all know, right? They provide services in Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, and Monroe. All types of services, fixed route, the fast routes, the connector service, the ADA paratransit, the flex on-demand microtransit, and the community partnership program. There's a link in here to the SMART budget. So what we...
Hillary, do you want to introduce the SMART folks?
Oh, yes. So Dwight Farrell is the general manager of SMART. Been with us for about 1.5 years, and we're thrilled to have him and his leadership. And Tiffany Gunter is the deputy general manager. Many of you may have worked with Tiffany in the past. She's been at the RTA, at SEMCOG, and most recently at Birmingham. You all want to introduce others as well?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. We have several members of our scheduling and planning team here with us today. Andy Thorner, who's been with SMART for 37 years. 37 years. So he's helped us a lot with the route expansion conversations and putting together a plan. We've also got Greg Lorenz, who is, let me get your title right, manager now, schedule? Service development. I'm working on getting this together. Greg Lorenz is with us as well. Sean Ryapel at the end of the road there is our legal counsel who's worked to develop the contracting concert with Bill and his team. And on the GoToMeeting link, Ryan Byrne, our chief financial officer, is also with us today to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tiffany. So what we looked at in terms of the SMART, yes, Dwight.
She has one significant announcement to make about a person who's not here, but will soon be here.
Okay.
So just so that everyone is aware that we are taking this initiative very seriously, we did recently extend an offer and it was accepted for our Vice President of Planning and Innovation. She is Harmony Lloyd. She is with the RTA currently. She'll be coming to join us next month, and we're really excited about moving forward. She'll be instrumental in how we carry out and execute our public hearings in this service as well.
Excellent. And Harmony's been involved in some of the initial conversations, Oakland County resident, and comes to you from the Flint transportation system, I think, right? Yeah, so an excellent resource. So what we considered when we thought about the SMART contract is, one, we know that for multiple years, they've been providing foundational services in this footprint. And so you'll see in the contract the foundational amount of $31.2 million, which continues and preserves the services that they currently provide, fixed route, and all the services that we've suggested. We also asked them to consider what expansions they could do in this year, knowing that all of us were anxious to get going in terms of especially some of the major job corridors and spots throughout the county that have really been, where fixed route has been absent. So they've come up with what we think is really an exciting set of expansions for 2023. And the budget for that is around $10 million. And so that is the second piece of what's in the scope of work. But just quickly to give you a sense, there is the spot along Woodward that has been an island where the buses don't stop. So obviously, working with the local communities, they'll be able to put additional stops along Woodward. So that is not the case anymore. Getting to Novi has been a priority for many of us. So there's several different routes that they can extend with their current infrastructure to get residents and workers out to Novi. There are new routes that they're suggesting that would run through Troy up to Rochester and over through Auburn Hills. There's improvements in the Pontiac and Auburn Hills area, and there's a new route along M59 that goes through Waterford out to White Lake Township. So with any of these expansions in the fixed route area, they are required by federal law to provide that ADA paratransit. So about $2-3 million of the estimate for the new services would be part of the ADA and paratransit service. So with SMART, you know, and their following of the federal regulations, it really depends on how much of a change it is. In terms of if it's a large-scale change, then they have public hearings and other things that they have to do to establish a new route. If it's in a continuation of a change, a continuation of a route, you know, those things may be able to happen more quickly. But that is what they will undertake, you know, after we approve this contract. So this is a map that kind of illustrates the previous chart. Again, you can see in yellow the routes that are basically extensions, and you can see in green the routes that are new routes. That takes us then to the local providers. The North Oakland Transit Authority, the Western Oakland Transit Authority, and the Older Persons Commission. So again, with each of these local providers, we asked them to come forward with budgets and scopes of work that they could accomplish within their current infrastructure or with vehicles that they could acquire more quickly. You know, they're providing a different type of service, so some of those vehicles are more readily available to them. So, and I don't know, do we want to stop and introduce the local providers as well, since they're all represented here? So, Tim, do you want to, as an Oakland County alumni, do you want to start?
And actually, my tech team has informed me that when introducing, you still got to come to the mic. So, Tim, if you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone. That way we can hear those names.
I'm Renee Courtwright, Executive Director for the Older Persons Commission.
I'm Tim Sylvia. I'm the Administrative Director for OPC, and yes, I'm with Oakland County for like 35 and a half years, something like that.
Great. A former member of the RTA.
Good morning. Lynn Gromoski from North Oakland Transportation Authority.
Hi, I'm Kim Viner from Western Oakland Transportation Authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I can't say enough good things about these local providers who have, you know, really grown sophisticated transit operations and have been really good partners of ours in the last few months.
Hillary, I'm not sure, but it looks like you lost your mic.
Oh. So again, asking them to look at improvements that they could make. Brett, do you want to do this part? The local improvements?
Do I have to? In working with the local providers, one thing we're working toward is standardization, and primarily related to hours of operation and also the fees that everyone charges. The fees will be implemented immediately, essentially. Everyone will have a standard $2 per ride fare for NOTA, WOTA, and OPC. The hours of operation we're beginning to normalize. NOTA already has a very big spread of hours and days. WOTA and OPC are both agreed to expand their hours of service for their riders. They all are going to hire and train staff, drivers, dispatch, and mobile mechanic positions. That will be happening this year. There's some capital improvements. NOTA has improvements needed on a parking lot on their site in Oxford. There are short-term purchases, and Hillary mentioned this. There are some vehicles that we can get prior to June that are in the budgets, and those will be purchased right away. The bigger purchases of vehicles, we have a grant meeting scheduled this week. We're going to start right away to look at how we can pool resources. possibly get some grant funding to support a larger purchase of vehicles in the second half of 2023. And the last item that I think is the most critical part, the last bullet point, is the desire and commitment to collaborate collectively among the 4 providers, the 3 locals, Ed Smart, and the county, to do some serious planning this year to figure out how we continue to expand coverage to cover all of Oakland County, as was the vision when the millage was passed. This pie chart shows how the anticipated millage revenue breaks down for 2023. You'll notice at the bottom it's 68.2 million. In some revised estimates, it's up a bit from the 66 that we had anticipated. You can see the divisions among that. There's the 41 for SMART, 1.9 for OPC, 3.4 for WODA, 2.8 for NODA. There's some admin and professional services in the reimbursement program that we'll speak about. And we have approximately, based on the budgets in the contracts before you today, we have approximately 15 million in reserve, and that'll go toward vehicle purchases later in the year, and also if there's any capital improvements that are identified later this year. And we think it's wise to also have some fund balance if future revenues don't turn out as high as they were this year. We have some balance in the coffers for future years as well. That's unlikely that we'll see a decrease in revenue.
Okay.
The 2 resolutions that Ms. Chambers mentioned, the reimbursement program and the professional services program, those are separate resolutions from the 4 contracts, and I can touch on the reimbursement program briefly right now, and then we can answer questions later. But there are a number of communities that are not receiving community credits. That's a funding stream that was through the old opt-in structure from the Oakland County Public Transit Authority. There's a number of communities that do not receive that funding. They are not covered by WODA, NODA, or OPC, or not touched by a SMART fixed route. So these are all the other remaining areas, the remaining cities, villages, and townships in Oakland County. And what we'd like to do is establish a reimbursement program where those communities can use these funds to cover their existing transportation costs at the local level. They all receive municipal credits. That's a funding stream from the state. But there are additional costs. Many of them, a good example is in the southwestern part of the county. Many communities contract with People's Express, and they incur costs that come out of their general fund. So we'll reimburse those communities for those expenses that they incur. This isn't intended to fund expansion of services. It's meant to cover existing expenses that they're incurring now. The expansion question will be addressed as we move forward this year and do additional planning with those other communities in Oakland County. The professional services contract, want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So again, for your considerations, we have before you the professional services contract, which would be really to perform the robust planning process with our stakeholders, our communities, and our residents to make sure that we're hearing their voices as well as part of this process. We also want to engage further with the transit providers because we realize that their service areas have the potential to overlap. And we want to make sure that there's a seamless transportation network throughout Oakland County. We know that for the last 100 years, transit and transportation have been a bit of a web to get from one part of the county to the other, and even in the region. So we want to start to untangle some of those things, and through the public engagement and planning process, we feel that we could put a team together of professionals to assist us with that. This is typically not funded through other mechanisms, so it's an opportunity that we would like to take at this time to really engage with those stakeholders. We also want to take a look at needed infrastructure, and we would need some assistance from transportation professionals to look at perhaps, for example, like garage locations, so that we don't have to drive from Holly to take a bus down to Troy to have it serviced. So where can we locate some of those infrastructure needs? And also really start to take a deeper dive on those state, federal, and even some of the private funding opportunities that are out there to help leverage our millage funding. So with that, we would be happy to entertain any questions and answer anything that you have.
Wonderful. I see Commissioner Long, then Commissioner Smith.
I don't know what you're going to ask. No. Hi, thank you for the presentation. So my question is, so executive department is hiring a transit division with 1 manager and 2 planner positions. So I don't know if I'm in favor of a professional contract of $2 million. We're only going to find out after they spend the $250. Every time they spend over $250, finance, it's going to be reported. I was under the impression that the positions would do this planning and stuff, but now we're doing a professional contract too. And I am concerned because, you know, there's money there, I get it, but it's taxpayer money. So I think that department, if we're hiring 3 full-time positions with hefty salaries, I don't understand how they can't plan a robust, whatever you say in here. So I don't understand. I know you just said stuff about it, but I'm not in favor of this because I think the positions can do it. So I have a hard time with some of the professional service contracts we have anyway. But yeah, I just feel like I don't know what the 3 people are going to do in their office. Just continue after this professional services figures out stuff. Are they just going to manage day to day, or because it's planner positions? So I don't like that. I don't like this professional contract. Thank you. I don't know if you can respond why we need it or not, but I think it. You know, is that your question?
I was going to wait until we actually got to that point.
What she said about it.
I know, but she's just doing a general presentation.
Oh, okay.
When we actually got to that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's my concern. So I'm not really in support of that, and I'd rather just wait till we get the people in position and have them do that, because to me that's a planning job, and there's going to be 2 people up there at the transit division. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 general questions at this point, and some of my specific questions, I'll wait till we get those resolutions specifically. One, on the reporting requirements, it's great that you were going to do an annual audit and quarterly performance reviews from each of the entities. Would it be possible, either before or after their audit, to have them come in front of this committee once a year to kind of give us an update, and we can hear directly from them, all 4 of them? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I think it would be good for us.
I'm sure they would welcome that.
Yeah, okay. Because I think it would be good for us that way we can ask specific questions that we may have to them versus having to go through 4 or 5 different steps to get there, all right? And then the second question has to do with capital. And I understand we're looking to buy buses with this money eventually. Now, will we own those buses? Will the entity own those buses? Who will own those pieces of equipment?
The local providers will own those buses.
The local provider, okay. So then my question becomes relative to SMART, since they.
We're contracting for the services that they
Agreed, okay.
provide.
And relative to SMART, because they support outside of the county. So are we going to be providing monies that are going to be used by them to support entities outside of Oakland County? If that's the case, are we going to say, okay, we're going to give you a percentage of, like, say a bus costs $5 million. So you're only going to use that bus 80% in Oakland County, so we're only going to give you, $4 million for that bus, and the other $1 million will have to come somewhere else. Is that how we're going to do it with SMART, or is it going to be different? I know it's kind of a different, complex
discussion. Do you want to answer the questions as we go? Because that one, I really appreciate that one. And, SMART is a different type of provider, as it is a four county provider, whose budget is, about $145 million, which is, just half of which is property tax, right? Because they are the recipient of the state and federal grants, which they leverage. So, and it also is different because Oakland County has on the SMART board, 2 representatives. Right now, Brett and I serve on the SMART board. So we approve monthly every contract. We approve the budget every year. We serve on the audit committee. So we have kind of direct oversight in terms of, the budget and the operations of SMART and the expansions. So when they think about the budget, if we're the vehicle purchase is, more contemplated in terms of the local providers. When they come up with the dollar for dollar, that's why we put it off, because we have to think through, what grants are out there and how we approach that vehicle purchase. But, does SMART, have an integrated budget Yes. You know, are there routes that start at 12 Mile and St. Clair Shores and run over to Novi? Yes. So, yeah, they have an integrated budget that we have oversight over.
Mr. Smith, you still
I have a
the floor.
follow-up based on whoever's comment.
And I
but
think
if you-
Dwight wants to
but
say
if you have
something as well, but go ahead,
relative to that
Dave.
question, let's stay on that, and then I'll follow up with my other question, if that's okay?
I missed some of what you said, and if you are going to speak, Dwight, what's your last name, Dwight? Mr. Farrell, please.
White works fine.
I said I have a follow-up question based on Hillary's comments, but.
And you still have the floor.
Okay, it's slightly different direction, but I'd like to hear about the topic of capital first before I move to that one, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right,
Gotcha.
thank you.
And then I see my chair wants to speak. Did you want to speak?
Well, I mean, I think, Dwight might actually be picking up on some of this, is that the way that capital also gets financed, I mean, the bipartisan infrastructure bill allows for a record investment in public transit and an ability to tap into those dollars. And so I think, to Commissioner Spiz's point, I mean, we want to make sure that the dollars that the taxpayers of Oakland County have approved for this, that we maximize the improvement of transit in Oakland County. And that means in some cases getting Oakland County residents to Macomb County to get to their doctor's appointment with some of our providers. And so I think we've got to look at that and ask that question. But there is a tremendous opportunity. And even before that, I mean, because I worked on a smaller project with SMART a little while back, is that being able to tap into federal dollar for the capital. Now, the maintenance and everything, that's a different story, but to get to access the capital to be able to bring additional vehicles, in some cases, we were eligible for full federal reimbursement. Then then SMART owns it, and the money came through SMART, or even when SMART purchased vehicles other places, SMART owns it and then gives it to local providers. And so it's a pretty complicated way. The idea is to get as many resources in possible. To the extent that we don't have to spend $1 on a vehicle, great if we can get other dollars to do it, because that helps support additional, I mean, that helps pay for the maintenance and operations. But we recognize that at some point we're going to have to invest some on the infrastructure.
To echo Dwight Farrell, General Manager SMART, to echo what Chairman Woodward said, we don't buy buses with local money. There's not enough local money to buy a bus, period. If it were not for the fact that Michigan did the local match, we'd really have a problem. So all of the buses in SMART's fleet are provided with federal dollars. We get federal formula money predicated on the miles that we operate to replace those vehicles. Any vehicle that we buy going forward, as was mentioned, we're about to award a contract for a lobbying firm because of all of the federal money that's available. So it's impossible to allocate a capital asset the way that you are speaking of when you have an organization that serves multiple counties. It's just.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, it's not possible, but in almost very few organizations have enough cash to pay $500,000 for a bus. And why would you do that when the federal government will give you money to buy it? And even the smaller vehicles that the local providers are provided through 5310 money. That's more federal money. So it's very little capital dollars that would have to go for this. Now, where I can see capital dollars going is for infrastructure improvements, because that's a whole different story, because that money is much more difficult to come by. So that's, that's a different kind of thing. If we have, as the system grows, obviously our infrastructure requirements will grow as far as facilities and our ability to be able to maintain them and upgrade them and that kind of thing. So this is how this can play into it. And that's also a time where you talk about private investment. So for what's happening right now, today, the vehicle requirement is going to be paid for by the federal government. And the state government.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Minus some of the smaller vehicles for the smaller providers.
Yeah. And
if we can get them reimbursed.
But so one of the things that we do, because I think we provide the vehicles, is that not correct? So we use the federal process for everything that we do as it relates to vehicles. So even if you pay cash for it, you can get reimbursed for it from the federal government. So I would not stress over that in the grand scheme of things. There are other things that I would stress over, but that would not be one of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that answer. So my follow-up question is in negotiations of these 4 different contracts, who from the county led those negotiations?
I mean, you know, myself, Brett, Bill, Aaron.
And
Yeah.
the reason I ask is based on your comment that you and Brett sit on the Work for Smart.
Yes.
Isn't that somewhat of a conflict of
It's
interest
not.
for the negotiation with them?
No, we asked Corp Counsel to look into that, and they did. And they.
Conflict of interest, they're negotiating on both sides?
There was no,
If you
there was
wanna-
no
so-
legal prohibition.
Can I get you to come to a mic? There's one here if you want.
The short, Solon Phillips Corporation Counsel, the short answer is no. There was no legal prohibition to Hillary and Brett serving in the roles that they serve.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Spiz? I'll go on then to Commissioner Markham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very excited about this. One of my kids last night said to me, Mom, if they actually get transit out here in Novi, you're going to have really accomplished something that you wanted to do, because I've been talking about transit in Novi since 1997, okay? So I'm very happy you're here and this far along. I'm very invested in it. So in your prior presentation, Mr. Rassigan, you showed the Corridor Improvement Authority boundaries for the city of Novi, and we are one of the biggest corridor improvement authorities in the county, I believe. And I know they have not spent much money out of that. I think it was formed in 2017, collecting the tax dollars and so on. I'm wondering, is there a way for us to work with groups like the Corridor Improvement Authority to talk specifically about infrastructure, bus stops, hubs, all that kind of stuff? That, to me, they're capturing county money, county tax dollars. Who's having those conversations?
They haven't occurred yet, but they can, certainly, they could use, that would be an eligible expense of that tax capture to make those improvements.
There are so many pockets of money that I think are available if we know where to look and who to talk to about some of this in terms of partnerships.
And I'm going to say it a little bit more strongly than Brett, and Chairman Woodward's probably going to say it a little bit more strongly than I am. I mean, there is a lot of capture going on of the transit money that the voters voted for, and so we want to make sure that we can establish partnerships so that can go to the overall big picture, you know, whether it's in a DDA or, as you mentioned, you know, that corridor, so that we're working with them or with the state legislature to ensure that those funds are used to improve mobility wherever they're being captured.
Chairman?
Right. I was about to say that. There is millions of dollars being captured by the corridor improvement authorities and the DDA because the 0.95 mils, each of those entities captured it. Some of us would remember the DIA and the zoo millage. There were some communities that decided not to send that money over to those respective entities, and state law had to get changed to make it happen. Technically, I think we want a partnership because, frankly, we want to connect all our downtowns. Why wouldn't we want to connect all our downtowns in a mobility strategy? Working out what that arrangement is, because the dollars are coming from this millage, needs to be used to improve transit experiences for people and connecting communities and connecting people to where they need to want to go. And so that's going to be an ongoing conversation that if you have a DDA in your area, by any means, I think it's fine to start talking about it because I'm sure their next report, the money, it gets technically landed February 1, and there'd be like a bloop. There's more there than they. I talked to one member, and they're like, we had no idea that our DDA would capture money. I'm like, I know. And I look forward to your plans to improve transit. But I think actually convening them or us convening, but you might be approached. Be proactive in approach, and I know working with the team that we're gonna, this is the conversation. Also working with our Main Street communities because we don't want it to be a conflict. I think there could be a very productive conversation about improving mobility and transit in every one of our, I believe we're upwards of 17 capture entities. Do you know off the top of your head? 22. Wow. So it's collectively millions of dollars are getting captured right now for this. That's additional dollars for transit that is outside the $67 million that we're talking about that come into Oakland County.
Terrific. And I just requested that we all get the list of all the DDAs, because just to have the contact information, I'll recess right now and we'll call them. But I'm kidding. So I do want to stay on track. Ms. Markham, did you have anything further?
Yeah, I did. Specific to the buses that we're buying, are there plans? I know there's a lot of need and not a lot of product out there right now, but, you know, what's our plan for green buses and all of that? I know SEMCOG has just done a whole award series in their carbon reduction plans, and they've got another grant process happening shortly. So what's our plan for getting to green buses as fast as we can?
I'm glad you asked. One of the challenges about EV buses is range.
Right.
The smart service area is quite expansive. And we have buses that stay out for 400 miles a day, and there is not an electric vehicle in the world that will do that.
Right.
So what we are exploring now is hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. There is a ton of federal money out there, from the EPA to the Department of Energy to the FTA, to do that. So we, as recently as last Friday, we had a conversation with AC Transit in Oakland, which is one of the preeminent zero-emission fleets in America. And so they've done a lot of work and are willing to work with us and help us, you know, as we go forward. So we're going to do an alternative fuel analysis to determine which is the best way to go. And so when you talk about infrastructure, putting hydrogen fueling into facilities may require additional land and that sort of thing. So there's federal dollars out there for a lot of it, but when we were talking earlier about where can these capital dollars go, that's certainly an area that can help. We're also looking at electric vehicles for paratransit, a service to the disabled, and that sort of thing. So we're, with the alternatives fuel analysis program, the objective is to come up with a long-term strategy for this is how we go from diesel to something other than diesel, and what that mix of electric and hydrogen or whatever other kind of zero-emission fuel may come about.
And so by having that plan in place, that makes it possible to draw down dollars from lots of organizations
Yes.
that are
Yes.
out there
Yes.
wanting to give money for
Correct.
all of
So,
this.
so part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill has got billions of dollars for zero-emission vehicles, of which we will be, and it's discretionary money, so, but we'll be competing, and we want to put ourselves in a position to compete for those dollars.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Johnson?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I think it's interesting that this side of the table, we all come from communities that have never had public transportation accessible to the masses. My two friends from Novi here, and then Rochester is my hometown. I live within walking distance of downtown, and I represent Auburn Hills and Rochester Hills. So I've been looking forward to this meeting for years, and I'm really excited to be here. That being said, I've got a litany of questions, and I hope you'll just bear with me because I'm cognizant of the time. I do want to echo the hesitations of Commissioner Long. I think that personally, I would like to reserve as much flexibility as possible, and that feels a little bit reductive. So if you could maybe offline educate me further about why we're exactly trying to do that $2 million on top of the admin that we'd already talked about, that'd be great. But my first question is, I read all 96 pages of the RTA's master plan last year, and I thought it was really enlightening, and I've read lots of research on transportation. And time again, frequency is identified as the single most important factor for increasing rides. And I'm sure we're all pretty sensitive to our reputation as a group of, as the government who just grabbed a bunch of taxpayer money, and the taxpayers are watching us to see what we do with that money. I am very cautious if we go the direction of haphazard expansion for the sake of expansion versus doubling down on the routes we have and increasing frequency and reliance and reliability to increase ridership, that ridership on those expansions, and I live in an expansion area, ridership on those expansions is not going to be very fruitful, and it's going to be a replay of the People Mover. It's going to be a replay of the Q line, where like, why are we spending money pushing buses down into downtown Rochester? And just based on the SMART's current timetables, probably hourly. And I guess I'm just wondering if you could help me understand why we're not setting ourselves up for failure by expanding geographically more than by expanding our timetable density.
Well, I think all of us probably have an opinion on that, so I'm not.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me just say this. The biggest challenge that we have right now for expanding anything is human beings. It's not equipment, it's people. So we have, and Tiffany can speak to the details, but we have a number of actually in-person hiring events that are going on all over this region to increase the number of bus operators, mechanics, and cleaners that we have. So we're also looking at ways to be able to expand demand, our own demand, our flex service, with the objective for all of it is being able to increase frequency. I agree with you. An hour service is not like having any. And so anything that's above 20 minutes in the 21st century just really doesn't work. So from our perspective and from our planning perspective, it is about making the routes that we have work better. One of the reasons why we brought Harmony on is to improve our own planning efforts within the organization. So I understand the excitement because there's a lot of money coming in. And as somebody who has been through this process before, it is about measuring expectations. So one of the things that we want to do is under-promise and over-deliver.
Awesome.
So these are, if I can, Dwight, I mean, these are expansions and extensions of routes that SMART feels are very much within their reach, so that they can do them and improve the foundational service as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. May I? Okay. All right. This is probably a much easier question. So standardizing fares, $2 was something that was noted for WOTA, NOTA, and OPC. Just curious if SMART proper is considering a per pair or per ride fare structure too, instead of a time-based by 4 hours, by 8 hours, by 24 hours.
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of that.
Oh.
That we did that.
Yep, that's how SMART fares, yeah.
So, well, we will certainly take a look at that because part of what our...
I'm sorry, are you talking about the fare that intercedes with Q line?
I don't think so. When I wrote SMART last week, and my options were by 4 hours, by 8 hours, or by 24 hours.
For the pass.
The single ride ticket is good for 4 hours.
Right. For you to do unlimited transfers and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So
That's
this
what
is that the same thing that we're talking about?
Yes, that's the same thing that you're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that we're going to explore is either you buy the fare or you buy a day pass. A lot of systems have gone to that to simplify the structure for the very reasons that you talk about. We're also going to look at something called fare capping, but we've got to have the technology to be able to do that. So fare capping is one of the ways that disadvantaged people who say, I can't afford $100 for a pass, not that the pass is $100, but I just pulled that number out there. Don't stress. That was just what hit my mind. Well, for $25, how about that? For $25, you can do the same thing through fare capping, which says after you take so many rides that equates to that, then you don't pay for the rest of the month. Okay. So there are a number of different things that are going to come into play And one of the things that I would caution this committee on is this is very dynamic. You know, and in a lot of ways, we're pushing SMART forward in ways that it has not gone before. So one of the things that we did, and just to be able to put this in perspective, we'd like to have a single application that allows for you to plan your trip, pay for your trip, and ride. So we just awarded a contract for a project manager to help us do that. Okay. To develop the specifications so we can put that out.
Awesome. Thank you.
So also it is our plan to increase microtransit. Now, that's not gonna happen this year, so don't anybody get
Don't
twisted.
issue the press release.
Don't get twisted. But no, don't do that. But microtransit expansion across the region is something that we like to do. And that's going to go with lots of community outreach and engagement to determine what the hours should be, how big zones should be. It's a lot of that. So we're not going to be like some mad scientists, you know, in a room saying, okay, here's the monster. But we'll all be mad scientists together.
Awesome. And then just one more, if I may. I'll be
Sure.
very quick.
And let me just
Please.
preface that by saying we're going to try to move along by fashioning our questions to the resolutions when we open them, and then we can vote as well. But Johnson and Rahman are both in line or in the queue for questions and comments, so go for it.
Oh, God. Well, this is the opposite of what you just asked for. It's a very philosophical question. I'm just curious, Dwight, and anyone else too, do you perceive SMART's role mainly to be to provide an alternative mode of transportation for workday commuters or to connect the residents of Oakland County to places they want to go more generally?
The second one.
Okay, thank you. I cede my floor.
I like your questions. That's a good question. Yeah. Commissioner Rahman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we're going to entertain questions at the resolutions,
Yes.
should I hold off until we get to that stage, or
Sure, it's your-
whatever's easiest?
Yeah,
just for
why don't we do
efficiency's
that?
sake. Okay, so I do have one quick question
Okay.
that will sort of tie into that. So as we looked at the potential expansion plans and sort of the map you presented, which I appreciate, it's really great to look at, and like Commissioner Marco, I'm a huge advocate of this. The one thing that I want to be very cognizant of is that we are including the cities and townships in any proposed rollout, right? So I know the lowest hanging fruit is going to be to expand our current lines, which I think is great. You know, coming from a community like Novi, I know it's very much needed, and it's sort of a no-brainer in my opinion that, hey, look, we already have existing routes, let's just take them a little bit farther. So we're hitting 12 Oaks Mall, we're hitting Providence Park Hospital, you know, those things make sense to me. But I know one of the big concerns I'm hearing as I talk to the communities is they've had little to no involvement thus far with anything in the process, right? So while maybe everybody in this room may be on board and this makes sense to us, it's really going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we try to roll anything out without first getting some buy-in from the cities. And I just want to make 100% sure that that is happening. And if it is, great, but I just didn't necessarily hear that in the presentation. So I just want to make sure we are on the same page in that regard.
We are definitely on the same page, and that is definitely something that happens when a route is expanded or extended.
Okay.
I can't stress it enough in terms of the community engagement, not just now, but ongoing. One of the things that we learned from one of the other transit systems that expanded microtransit was they decided to expand microtransit so that the hours were the same across all 32 zones that they had. Well, they found out that that doesn't necessarily make sense. So now they're going back through a series of community meetings to see, both talking with citizens and businesses in terms of what makes sense for this group versus another group. Always with the intention of making sure that you can get home. So there's going to be, again, one of the reasons for hiring Harmony onto our staff is she is familiar with all of the federally required public engagement processes that are required to be able to do exactly what you're talking about. So we get, our federal funding is tied to following these processes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great, so what we're going to do now is I'll entertain a motion to receive and file, and then, so moved, supported by Commissioner Rahman. And we'll go ahead and, the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Any further discussion? Let us prompt the vote, thank you.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Great, that motion to receive and file carried. We are now at item D. I'll entertain a motion to accept that to recommend and forward to finance, which is item D, the Economic Development Interlocal Agreement between Western Oakland Transportation Authority and Oakland County for local public transportation services. I have a motion. Commissioner Johnson and supported by Commissioner Long. Comments, questions, thoughts on item D?
I mean,
So one quick question, just want to clarify. So with the request for appropriation of funding, and really it's for all of these, it's not just for D, it's for continuation and expansion of said services, correct? So are we completely crystal clear on what that expansion is? Is it primarily for, getting everything up to speed on the back end? Is it truly for expansion? I just wanted to make sure I understood what the money is being appropriated for at this time.
Yes, it is for continuation and preserving their current service. It's for expansions that they can do within their current infrastructure, like longer hours of operation, and it's for building to the point where we have increased vehicles. So that's why you'll see skipping around, right, the NOTA budget, the improvement to the parking lot, because they have EV vehicles coming on board, so they need the EV charging stations, or they need to improve their technology, or they need to hire these mobile mechanics. So it's all three of those things, leaving out the major expansion of vehicles, which we want to take some time and make sure that we're accessing other funds. We'll probably come back in the summer for an amendment to grapple with that purchase of those vehicles.
Got it, okay. Just so that.
Those are the three segments.
Okay.
So it is building for that future expansion as well.
Got it.
Commissioner Woodward.
So, I mean, if you can look into the scope of services, and there's like, again, the commonality of universal rider fees, I would say equivalent, slight variations on hours of service in an area. And correct me if I'm wrong, like in the presentation, I don't think it actually popped up on that screen, but in the slides, like the area that's drawn, that like this is like the expansion area based on existing capacity and hopefully more with more vehicles. That's accurate?
Those maps are basically the current areas. The expansions would be not only improved services, as Brandon said, but also in some aspects where they're taking people to. Not necessarily where they're picking people up.
Right, okay, so Milford. I know the 4 communities that made up WODA. Over this area, if there's capacity, do we have the ability to pick up people in Milford?
That would still need to be planned for. That area is the driving boundary.
Right.
The orange is the pickup area, and the driving boundary is the brown.
Right. No, I understand that, but it's, I guess, like the question, I mean, to the world, like if there is capacity, and certainly need more vehicles, and I know Milford was a community that WODA supported, and probably still get calls to this day thinking it's like, so we're here, we have the resources, our capacity, and I know every one of these transit agencies are trying to want to be able to move as many people as possible. So that, I guess, to the world is, and I think WODA has to manage the expectation was communicated out there of what's able to be delivered. Would someone in Milford be able to get on a vehicle if there was capacity?
If I may. So that's the next phase of this process after we get through the contracts. It's going right back to Commissioner Rahman's comments. We need to engage with those communities and make sure that they are in line with the local providers and communicating, I guess, with the local providers in the communities to make sure that it's a feasible option. So that's our next phase of the process. What you see before you is their current service areas. They pick up folks in the darker colored communities, and then they drop off in those locations in the driving areas.
That's last bullet. Collaborate with other transportation providers, Oakland County local communities, identify expanded geographic surface areas.
Okay.
Does that clear it up for you, Commissioner?
Mostly, yes.
I need you to be clear.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to Commissioner Rahman's point of view, particularly around the route stuff, if my grandma needs to be picked up to go to the doctor in Milford, I don't know how much community engagement has to happen as long as grandma gets to the doctor. I mean, I get just like, and I know that there's other providers like in the space, and that's fine as far, because we're talking about a reimbursement system and everything, but again, if there's a provider that says, hey, I've got capacity, I don't want to put words in what is my, we have capacity, we have a mechanism to pick you up, and it might got to give us some time. But there is no, before we had, I mean, a lot of these entities, whether it was a millage-supported local transit agency or it was a general fund entity, it was that community, and it was like service. That's why these areas are the base areas of where those dollars came from. The only limitation to who can a ride be provided to is on the capacity to deliver that service, because the whole county is paying into the millage. And so that's why I really, to the extent we want to push, and when we're pushing expansion dollars, so I'm going to pick on my colleague, Commissioner Long, that if there's a Commerce resident at the very tip, I mean, ran across the street from White Lake, like, I need to go to the doctor. That's right. Can we get them? Like, there's nothing that stops it, and we'll be. I mean, I think to the extent we want to be tracking this stuff, and like, what does it cost to keep running this? As far as I'm concerned, we want to feed the beast and expand into these other areas that just this boundary is largely defined on. This is as much area we can cover with our fleet to be able to get people back and forth and move around. So there's, my hope would be, and I'm seeing nodding that, like, we're going to pick up as many people and move them around as much as possible. But again, I don't want to overcommit that if that's not the case.
Under promise,
Under promise.
over deliver. Absolutely. Okay. Oh, Commissioner Markham. She said she'd be quick. And
Thank
it's
you,
her
Madam
meeting
Chair.
that's next.
I would just like to suggest that as these discussions are taking place in all of these communities, that the commissioners are notified and on the distribution so we can show up to the meetings if we can. Because, yeah. Actually, thank you, Commissioner Gershenson, for the prompt. So, but yeah, if we could please do that. Thank you.
Now, thank you for putting that in the, for the record. So we'll go ahead and prompt the vote for our WOTA agreement,
C, right?
9D.
Oh, my God. All right, thank you. I'll get there
This is
eventually.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
8 yeas, 0 nays. That motion carried. That takes us to 9E. I'll accept a motion to open that report and remit.
And you do want to announce the name.
Yes, which is the Economic Development Interlocal Agreement between the Rochester Hills Oakland Rochester Older Persons Commission and the Oakland County for Local Public Transportation Services. I'll accept a motion. I think I saw Mr. Spiz and Mr. Johnson. And folks, any discussion or comment on this particular matter? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. Item 9E, motion carried. Takes us to item 9F, which is the Economic Development Interlocal Agreement between North Oakland Transportation Authority and Oakland County for Local Public Transportation Services. Moved by Mr. Spiz, supported by Ms. Markham. I did want to draw your attention to an addition. It should be in the record there. I'm looking at the agreement here between NODA and Oakland County, and it's the fourth line down, Township of Addison. So just making sure you see that in your notes as well. Any further discussion or comments on item 9F? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and prompt the vote.
and 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion carries. That is 9F. Takes us to 9G, Economic Development Interlocal Agreement between Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation and Oakland County for countywide public transportation services. Can I get a motion to recommend and forward to Finance? Commissioner Woodward and Commissioner Markham.
I have two questions.
Sure.
I mean, one of the, I think it was explained before. That, I mean, aside from, again, all of these like follow in our commitment of like what the base was, and I'm going to see that it's higher than the base because we want to build the capacity to do more. The expansion service. So, like on the current service that Smart's providing, is there a way as a companion? I mean, it's kind of like we know it, but is there a way to enumerate those routes that are, and services like as a attachment to this agreement between now and?
What do you mean by enumerate?
Well, so we saw the expansion routes, but what you don't see is the current routes on this map. And we've seen current routes, and the current routes exist, and you come into my office, so you can see it all the time because I look at it every day. But that there's some documentation like of that 30 big chunk money that to maintain everything that we currently have, and I think maintain with like an asterisk because as SMART continues, its overall planning. You've heard a reference of microtrans and other things. Things might change to better deliver transit in the area. But whatever that is right now, that we can like say this is what we're using, because I think it is our responsibility across all of this is to make sure that we remain accountable to all county residents. In that, yep, we're doing this. Like from a performance perspective, yep, we're doing this, and here's the quality, and here's our plan to improve quality. And as you heard the general manager say, like we need more drivers and people to do this, help support this. As that improves, knock on wood, that we see it result in more rides being delivered, working on an improvement of frequency, and all those other types of things. And so, be able to have a baseline. $30-some million. We know it's just keep doing what you have been doing, but I think this is the maiden voyage of these agreements. That should be at least like an attachment to the doc. So between now and the board meeting, we can get something to that effect. So that was the first thing. The second. So on the routes, and people have heard. Many of you have already heard me. Is like this Rochester route. So if it's an extension. Can we extend further south to the Royal Oak Transit Center?
Yes, you have a commitment on that.
Beautiful.
That's how I'm going to get to Rochester.
Fantastic. And then I think the other point I asked, Hillary answered this for me right before, the pricing, and I think we don't need to know like what the mile costs for delivering fixed route and what the kind of the average is. As we review and monitor the stuff, we'll look at it. But this is based on, because we'll be able to send the money to SMART. So while we're sending over $10 million, there's these dollars are eligible for LBO, local bus operating dollars of about 29%? 29% match. So, I think it's one way of thinking about it, $10 million. And then there's another almost $3 million of state dollars that's going to help support this. And at some point, we'll be telling a much bigger picture. And this is the nuance of the funding, that this is how much money that we have in this pot to help support this effort. We want to be maximizing every available dollar out there to improve robust service. So the cost of this is more than the additional dollars we're providing to SMART, because they're relying on the state funds that they're able to draw down. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention.
Commissioner Spitz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, and I don't know if there is an answer out there, because Chairman Woodward briefly touched about it. From the road commissioner's perspective, we understand how much it is roughly for a mile of road. We're asking for $10.1 million additional funding, and Hillary and I touched on a little bit yesterday on the way SMART does their budget. It's not necessarily easy to break all that out. But is there a rough idea? Can I get a ballpark? I'm an engineer. I'm a numbers guy. I need to get a good idea. Making up that $10.1 million, I have no idea based on what's in this list of how that is made up, other than the 2.5 for the ADA part of it, right? So out of the other $7.6 million, is it for, I think, 3 extended routes and a new route? Is it $1 million for 20 more stops? Is it $1 million for 40 more miles? I mean, just ballparking. I don't
Right.
know if that's even possible, but
It is. They look at it in a similar way in terms of given route. Ryan, do you want to answer that? We haven't given you an opportunity.
How do you price a bus route?
I don't need to get super detailed, but
And maybe that's a future meeting.
I'll be open to that. I just like to get a good idea.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't know if
For our fixed route service, we're at approximately $13 per mile of service. That's on average. Now, some routes are a little, traffic's a little more, so it's not exact, but on average, Smart Budget's about $13 per mile of fixed route service. The connector service, or our paratransit service, is a little bit of a weird animal in that it has more to do with service area as opposed to actual miles, because you have to provide that service within a geographic region, and you're not running that bus unless there's a demand for it. So that's a little harder to estimate, but based on the expansion in the geographic area that we'd have to provide that's the driver for the 2.5 that we've estimated for paratransit service. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. That gives me a ballpark, and I can actually maybe run some math and get a good idea. My second question, and you may not have this answer yet, also being an engineer, I'd like to know effective dates. When do things start? Do we have a target when these expanded routes are going to start? I don't need an exact date, because I'd say Monday, March 1st. Let's say, first quarter, second quarter, or the month of May, something like that. Do we have a good idea on when some of these will start? So I think it would be good for all of us to know that.
Under promise and over deliver.
That's right, Commissioner. Great question. So what we have to do next, and to Commissioner Rahman's point on the public hearings, is we need to get through those, and that's going to take a couple of months to do. So we're targeting the start of this once the commission has taken made full approval of the plan, to move forward from that point. Probably we'll go through public hearings through the month of May. So we won't be done with that until June. And from that, the easier low-hanging fruit, the extensions of the routes, we expect to bring those online pretty much immediately following those approvals. And then after that, working with the new routes, the Rochester route, that's going to take a little bit longer. So we're giving ourselves the full fiscal year to get online. And we don't want to give you anything before that, because we do have to hire operators. So
That was gonna be my next question.
that is the plan.
The comment was made about operators earlier.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And our workforce department is working with SMART on a really exciting workforce opportunity at M1 Concourse, where we're going to offer people the opportunity to drive buses.
At high speeds?
Like speed? Like in a circle? Like the movie?
If you're going to high speeds, I'm in.
We need Keanu Reeves.
That was going to be my question.
Beautiful.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Just on follow-up to that, actually, and pardon my ignorance, but what is the requirement for you to have public hearings and public comment periods for route expansion? That's a huge time suck.
Yeah,
So just curious.
Andy is going to answer that question
Okay.
way more factually than I will.
Andy Thorner, Manager of Planning at SMART. As Hillary mentioned, when we do these route changes, we have to follow federal policy, and it all falls under Title VI, which is the Civil Rights Act, where we have to show we don't discriminate for low income and minority. And saying that we have a threshold of 25% change in a route. So like the Grand River route, we end in Farmington Hills. That extension, based on the entire route length, will be less than 25%. So like technically that route, we can change without going through public engagement, but we're going to take all of these changes to the public and have public meetings in Pontiac. I mean in Oakland County.
Sure.
Our policy that was approved by the board and approved by the feds say that we have to put notices in the regional paper, the Free Press, and the news, and a minority paper, which we use, the Michigan Chronicle. And those have to be put in 20 days prior to any public outreach.
Cool.
And so we'll publish those. And then our policy also says we have to have one public hearing in each of the counties that's affected. Well, primarily, I think we're only talking Oakland County with these changes. So policy-wise, we have to have one public hearing, and that's where we bring in a court reporter. They document everything. But prior to that, we do have public meetings that aren't as official, where we do a transcript and stuff. So, we'll take that information, all the comments, and we compile it, and we put it into a document and give it to the board for their approval. So any of these changes will go to the board for approval. And then we also have to do a part of this whole public process. We have to do another document called a service equity analysis. So whenever we make a major service change, we have to look at each route. We have to do a whole demographic analysis, look at minority and low income, see how they're going to be affected by it, and do that analysis and present it to the board. So that's kind of our public hearing process.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Just a clarification point, the meetings are held locally, you said, or are they held in
Yes.
Pontiac?
No, I misspoke about Pontiac.
Okay.
But we may have one in Pontiac.
Okay.
We may, have in Novi, Rochester Hills. I'm sure our new vice president of planning will make those decisions. We use our Madonna Van Fossen, who's our Oakland County ombuds person. I know a lot of you, probably people know of her. In the past, she's helped us locate facilities and places to hold meetings.
Our commissioners stand at your beck and call. We'll find you the meeting space.
Okay, great.
Wonderful. I think that covers all hearts and minds. I did want to just make a quick plug for the 8 Mile Southfield intersection, where it does still look very much like a, we'll call it a drop zone, where doesn't seem to be any lines. It's quite difficult, but of course I'll look forward to those opportunities to speak when it's opened up to the public. So with that, let's go ahead and prompt the vote for item 9G.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Thank you. Item 9G, motion carried. And takes us to 9H, Economic Development Resolution Authorization for the Local Transportation Reimbursement Program. Mr. Wypert, Mr. Spiz, and thoughts, concerns, questions? Mr. Woodward?
No, I think this is, a great idea. I guess one suggestion, and I don't want to take up time here, but maybe in finance to amend the title, because the idea is like this is a one-year thing, so we don't want to put out there that this local transportation reimbursement program is an ongoing thing, so either adding the word interim or 2023, adding something to that, and so between now and the next meeting, can maybe make an adjustment and reflect it. But I think this is a really, many of us have heard some of the challenges of, well, we do this and whatever that is, that as a county, we are saying we're going to set some money aside to fully reimburse you. The county's all paying into this millage, whatever your out-of-pocket costs beyond the municipal credits and other grants that you have coming in, that every community will be made whole. And over the course of this year, amendments to agreements, expansion, all those types of things, that we'll figure out how it's going forward. But I think it's really important that all of us communicate this is a one-year thing. This is, should not be looked at as an ongoing. It's a policy conversation, but the intent is for it to be 1 year. The second piece of that is the $500,000 that we're based on the information that we have, we're pretty confident that will cover it. I know that there's one, community that puts a considerable amount in. And I think many of you, Independence Township, and I've actually talked with them as well. And but it's going to take a big chunk of that 500. I think the other communities mostly rely on municipal credits to fund their transit services. So the margin there is probably small. So
we believe it'll cover it.
Okay. Sounds good.
You said not to.
Great. Anything further? All right, so noted, and we'll address that afterwards. For now, the title will remain the same, and Finance Chair can work on that later. All right, let's prompt the vote.
You have 8 yeas and 0 nays.
Wonderful, that motion carries. That's 9H, motion passed. Takes us to 9I, which is Executive Office Resolution Request to enter into professional services contracts for countywide transit planning and public engagement and appropriation of Oakland County Transportation millage funds. I'll entertain a motion. Mrs. Markham, supported by Commissioner Rahman. Thank you.
If I might, on this, because I know that it has come up several times, and I actually think, and I was taking notes as everyone kind of asked questions or raised points, to a certain extent, I think all of you have made the case for why we need this technical assistance. And I know that professional service contracts are, not all are controversial. I know that the notion of consultants, from the board's perspective has been, sometimes controversial. But I think when you think through what we've all talked about in terms of public engagement, in terms of technical expertise, in terms of making sure that we're leveraging federal and state funding and what we don't and what we know and what we don't know, I think that we've actually made the case for why we need this. I mean, at some point, Brett and Kristen need to go back to their day jobs. And yes, we are grateful that we will hopefully, knock on wood, find a manager that has a level of transit expertise. But they're still going to need to be backstopped by a really kind of a professional independent outfit who can do all of those things in terms of, the analysis, the public engagement, the demographics, the flow, the cost, the grants. I mean, even an outfit like SMART, who has transit 35-year experts in terms of planning, approves contracts to bring on outside independent transit expertise to help, think through the big picture. And so I would just ask that this need not be discounted, or we appreciate the confidence that you have in the staff, but that it not be underestimated how much kind of, how important this could be in terms of our efforts going forward. And it may not be $2 million. SMART, we just approved a contract, and they can speak to that in terms of what they're bringing on to do some overall planning and analysis. It could be, and I think I saw Sean stick his head in here somewhere, could be, and I see Scott Guzzi out there, it could be that we kind of piggyback onto that contract and it's less. But I do really believe that it is important for us to have an independent outfit that we can engage to do things. I mean, I'm more than happy to schedule neighborhood meetings. I'm more than happy to go to any meeting that you have. But there's nothing better than an independent outfit that goes out and talks to stakeholders and does public, online, in person, all different types of engagement to gather input to help us figure out what's the best next step for us to really expand this countywide system. So I would just ask that you consider giving us some ability to bring on that level of expertise.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Mr. Spith?
Did you want to go first? I had your hand up before I pushed my button.
You can
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, I want to echo Chief Deputy Chambers' comments that the need and support. But what I think I also hear, and I heard from some of you, prior to this, that the details and actually how this will work, we want more information. So if we can, we're on such a roll moving this stuff forward. I don't want it to derail. So is there a way to, over the next couple weeks, flesh out what this looks like? Because there is, it might not be more than $2 million. Maybe it's less than $2 million. What does that look like? What is the community? What is the additional assistance to community engagement look like? So we have a better sense of this then. And I think I hear my colleagues that $2 million and exactly what is it going to be used for? To get a little bit more clarity would make sense for folks. And I also good at counting. So,
So you want to postpone this or to the next or economic? Or
can we, I mean, postpone to the next EDI meeting?
Which would be 2 weeks from today. However, we only have one full board meeting this month. So it would have to wait any kind of full action until March, which might delay their planning.
I don't know if that, well, I don't think it throws it off. It's like March 2nd or 3rd is when our meeting is.
Okay.
Then we also got to get our staff in place.
Second.
Correct. Commissioner Spitz?
Yeah, if I could comment that, I know I'm probably the loudest on the board relative to using consultants on the outside. I'm not a big fan, it's no secret. What I'd like to recommend here, because there are some cases where you do need them, I do see that, and especially when we get into some of the newer technology that I know we're talking, that's going to be out there, that there's not that many experts out there, and I'm sure that there's not that many that are available to be hired at this point, so we will need it. All I'm asking for, and I think many here are probably asking for just a little bit more time, I'd like to actually see hopefully a manager come in first so they can help us develop this versus us trying to do it and you guys are trying to do it on the side or in place of your other jobs, whichever one you're trying to do. I'd like a little bit more time than 2 weeks personally. I'd like to say another month or at least until we get the manager in place, that we have this discussion at that point, because I think we'll have a better idea of what we truly need. That's just my opinion. Because I'd hate to see us go out and put this in place and then have a manager come in and go in a different direction.
And I don't, look, I understand. I just want to, again, emphasize, you know, we are talking about shepherding $68 million. And between what you have already approved in terms of the transit office and this, that's 4% of the $68 million to make sure that we expand and use those and make the right next steps in terms of, you know, what Brandon talked about in terms of improving the current service, what we talk about in terms of how to interweave the local providers. And I just have to say, since Brett, Kristen, and I have been the ones, you know, with Chairman Woodward's support, who've been engaging with the local communities, I think the level of engagement that you are encouraging us to do would be really stronger if it was coming from also an independent entity, because then they can talk the nuts and bolts, they can talk about what the real needs are. It's not a political conversation. So I'm fine with taking more time and engaging around the substance, but I just hope that you'll appreciate like the work that is before us to do and what you're asking us to do, and that fact of having just a backstop of an independent expert, you know, and I don't even know who that would be, at our disposal to use so that it's not just, you know, staff driven. I just don't think I can underestimate the importance of that.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. I'm certainly not opposed to hiring outside entities. I know I've used the analogy a few times with a few of you, but there's a great analogy in public transit that, like, if you show a group of people an avocado and tell them it makes this really cool thing called guacamole, but they've never learned the process before, it's really hard to just guess how guacamole is made. So I understand that our county, since we don't have, like, really thriving regional public transportation right now, it's probably going to be difficult to make that guacamole without hiring outside people who know the recipe first. I do want to not be redundant, though, and I just, when we are getting more specific information in the future, if you could point out why we need this right now, when, from my vantage point, the RTA did exactly this thing 2 years ago, already in the context of COVID, that would be really helpful for me, especially from a public engagement perspective. Thanks.
So we do have a motion on the floor for item 9I.
Repeat it?
You want to repeat it? It's just as written.
I thought
No,
Oh, yeah.
there's no motion to did we make a motion to postpone?
Oh, I didn't think so. That's why
I think that-
I'll make
It's
a
on the table.
recommended form,
I mean,
Right.
they haven't done it.
One moved it, the resolution, but we haven't had any.
Okay.
Mr. Wyper?
I'll make a motion, we postpone to the next economic development meeting to get more information.
I'll support that.
Moved and supported.
That's February 22nd.
Yes, it
February
is.
22nd.
David Wyper. Any discussion?
Discussion, and Hillary, I get it. Hillary, I get it. It's a big deal. You're gonna need it.
And you saw the meeting that you saw the meeting that I engaged in. You know that would be a more constructive conversation if it wasn't Hillary Chambers talking to your communities.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So it's, I'm just want more information, so I know we're gonna need something.
Commissioner Smith?
I guess my point is, I'm just going to probably repeat myself. Instead of just to the 22nd, I'd like to see us have a manager at least identified and I'll take identified at this point before we go down that path. That's just me.
All right, let's prompt the vote on the postponement
So this is to February 22nd.
to
The next meeting.
22nd, yeah.
Oh.
You have 7 yeas and 1 nay.
Were you the unanimous breaker?
So that motion carries 6 to 1. 7 to 1. And therefore, the motion that was already there is no longer,
Correct. Set aside.
is set aside and it's, right, supersedes. It's wonderful. Then that takes us to our, thank you, wonderful people at the end of the table for spending all your morning with us. We're going to move into item 10, which is public comment. And anyone from the public who'd like to address the Economic Development Infrastructure Committee this morning, please do make your way to the front of the room. Seeing no one moving to the front of the room, public comment is officially closed. That takes us to item 11, other business and adjournment. Anything from the body? Seeing nothing, that means this robust meeting of the Economic Development Infrastructure Committee is adjourned.